Welcome to the John Campea Podcast, Episode 3 for Wednesday, March the 9th, 2016. On this episode of the John Campea Podcast, we're talking a little Batman vs. Superman, the war between fanboys and the war of misinformation going on, a great Star Wars fan film out there called Darth Maul Apprentice, a brand new and better Ghostbusters trailer, a new poster and synopsis for the Flash and Supergirl crossover, and a few things more. Thanks for joining us. Sit back, relax. The John Campea Podcast starts right now. Well, hey there, everybody, and welcome to the John Campea Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me here. It may sound like a little bit different today, and there's a reason why the sound of the podcast is a little bit different today, and that is because I am not in my regular podcast studio. You also notice that today's podcast got up a little bit late. There's a reason for all of that, and I'll get to those reasonings a little bit later. Hey, thanks for joining me, guys. Wow, Episode 3 of the John Campea Podcast. And yesterday was episode 2, and I woke up to a really cool surprise yesterday. iTunes has rankings of their of podcasts that are on there, and one of the categories, I think there's like 15 categories, can't remember, but one of the categories is TV and film. And obviously, this particular podcast, because the majority of what we talk about here is TV and film. The majority, this podcast falls under TV and film, and I was really kind of hoping, I had this little dream that maybe the John Campea Podcast would crack the top 100 in TV and film. I thought that would be really cool. Well, lo and behold, yesterday, I get some emails from people letting me know, hey, John, did you see that you debuted at number 1 on iTunes? I'm like, what? And sure enough, I went and looked. And as of this morning, still, the John Campea Podcast is the number 1 podcast in TV and film. And in the overall US-wide, for every category, we're number 26, which is really kind of insane. So a huge thank you to all of you guys who have checked out this podcast and have made now this podcast a part of your day. Hey, listen, one of the questions that I've been getting from people has been, hey, is this a weekly podcast? Is this a daily podcast? What's going on? The answer to that question is this is a whenever I kind of feel like it podcast. Well, so what will probably happen is it will probably end up being 3 to 4 times a week. So that's probably what the John Campea Podcast is going to end up being. I'm sure there are going to be some days that are going to be busy because, like I said, this podcast is not my new job. This is something I'm doing for fun because I love talking movies with you guys and stuff that's going on. So I'm not going to be able to do it every day, but probably you can guess that there's going to be 3 to 4 times a week. Maybe there'll be some weeks where I do Monday through Friday. Maybe there might be some weeks where I get 2 out, but I think for the most part, there's going to be a new episode of the John Campea Podcast 3 to 5 times per week. So again, thank you for everything, guys. Thank you for making this the number 1 podcast of iTunes. That is awesome. And I hope you guys tuned in. We had a great episode yesterday on Heroes with me, John Schnepp, Amy, and El Mayimbe. We had a great episode of Heroes yesterday. Make sure you go and check that out on the Collider Video YouTube channel. That is up now. Heroes, such a good time. And don't forget, guys, if you're in the Los Angeles area and you want to meet me and John Schnepp and Umberto and Robert and Amy and the regular cast of Heroes, we are going to be doing a panel on the Saturday night at WonderCon in Los Angeles. Is at the end of March. Check my social media and Schnepp's social media for all the details about that. Cannot wait to see you guys there. All right, guys, there's a few things I want to cover today in the world of movie news and stuff like that and some television stuff. But I should mention this off the top. I got notified. First of all, I find out a lot of stuff because you guys tweet to me. And hopefully you guys are following me on Twitter. I'm at John Campea. It's that simple. And follow me on Facebook too, at John Campea. And follow me on Instagram, at John Campea. And follow me on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Campea. Anyway, enough social media plugging. Anyway, I started getting notified a couple days ago about this new Star Wars fan film that somebody had put together. And it was called Darth Maul Apprentice. I thought, okay, that sounds neat. So I finally got around to watching it. And it's spectacular. Like, basically the quote unquote story, there's not much story to it. It takes place before the events of the Phantom Menace, right before the events of the Phantom Menace. Okay. So it's Darth Maul training on some world, and some Jedis find their world, and Darth Maul has to wipe out these Jedis before they can report to the council that the Sith still exist, and the Emperor makes an appearance and stuff like that. It's not like some people writing to me and saying it's the greatest fan film ever, and I would say no, it's not, because it's very, very thin on story. It's not a story thing. What it is a great action fan short film, because the fighting choreography in it, the dude looks dead on like Maul. The dude they got playing Darth Maul looks dead on like Darth Maul. It's actually pretty spectacular how good this guy looks. And the fighting between him and the Jedi is wonderful. Like one of the best choreographed Star Wars fan films I've ever seen. I'm not ready to call it the best, but definitely one of the best. My one little gripe with it, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this fan film. If you've not, jump on YouTube and just search Darth Maul Apprentice. It's pretty wonderful. They did such a great job putting this together. My one little gripe, and this is true of a lot of fan films. You had this group of about 4 or 5 Jedi, right? I always just get a little, you can tell when the filmmakers, these fan filmmakers, just use their buddies, because the Jedis are always like 25 or younger. It would have been nice to have like a 50-year-old, Jedi mentor amongst the group, because the guy who's supposed to be like the main lead Jedi of them, he looks like he's no more than like 27. I don't know. Maybe somebody will tweet me and say the dude's actually 35, and that's cool if it is. I'm just saying, as I'm watching it, he kind of looks like he's 23. And so watching a lot of these Star Wars fan films where these Jedis are always like in their early 20s or late teens, it's like, come on, you made Darth Maul look so perfect. Maybe you could have made it feel a little bit better by getting an older guy. But honestly, that's my biggest gripe. This is a fun, entertaining little fan film that the fighting is spectacular. Like I said, Maul looks great. And it is definitely, I think it's only about 10 minutes as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's short. Like it's only about 10 minutes. It is definitely worth your time to go and check out Darth Maul Apprentice. Once again, jump on YouTube there and see if you can find it. I got a few other things I want to talk about here. I'm going to start off with this, even though this isn't a piece of movie news per se. And I'm going to get to some movie news here in a second. Like I mentioned off top, we're going to be talking some Ghostbusters. We're going to be talking about a few other items here, The Flash and Supergirl and Chewbacca. But I wanted to talk about this for a second. There have been, Batman versus Superman is coming out here pretty soon. A couple weeks away now. And how excited are we? I mean, I'm so freaking excited. I can't even put it into words, but I've been waiting decades to see Batman and Superman fight on screen. Well, first of all, we've all been waiting decades just to see Batman and Superman in a movie together. It's never happened, but to see them fight on screen. And I was the first person, me and Schnepp, first people in the world, jump online and say, when they announced Ben Affleck as Batman, when the whole world was laughing, saying, ha ha, they remember in all the Marvel fanboys would put out these memes where it's got, you've seen the memes, right? Where it's like a boardroom. It's a picture of a boardroom where everybody around the board table is laughing their heads off. And the little subtitle on it is, they just cast Ben Affleck as Batman. And it's supposed to be in the Marvel studio boardroom or something like that. And everybody's laughing, ha ha ha. In the midst of all that, when everybody's laughing and mocking it, I got on YouTube and I said, forget everything. This is brilliant. Ben Affleck is going to be a great Batman. He's going to be a great Batman. And John Schnepp and I made a video about it a half hour after they made the announcement, and everybody was laughing. And guess what? Nobody's laughing anymore, because we've seen how great Ben looks in this. We've heard how he's been approaching this. He is going to be a great Batman. And that doesn't automatically mean that Batman versus Superman is going to be a great movie. We don't know until we see it. I'm just saying, one of the things I feel very confident about is I believe Ben Affleck is going to be an awesome Batman. But anyway, and you guys already know I love Man of Steel. I think Man of Steel is a brilliant film. And I love Henry Cavill as Superman. So I'm really looking forward to this film. But what has been really interesting in the lead up to Batman v Superman is, number one, the totally expected banter of the idiot fanboys. You got the one side of the idiot fanboys who are the Marvel idiot fanboys, is just like everything DC sucks. And then you got the DC side of the idiot fanboys that is like, no, it's Batman versus Superman, so therefore automatically it's going to be awesome. And you know my whole opinion about idiot fanboys. It is great to be a fanboy, but when your fanboyism becomes, when you define your here's the thing to me. To me, fanboyism is defined by what you love. That should be what your fanboyism. If you're somebody who your fanboyism or fangirlism is defined by what you hate, then you're doing fanism. You're doing fanism wrong. You're doing it the wrong way. All right? Because it's great to be a Marvel fanboy if your Marvel fanboyism is defined by the fact that you love Marvel stuff. But the moment that you start defining your Marvel fanism, and included in your definition of your Marvel fanism is that you have to hate DC, well, now you've gone from being a fanboy to being a moron. Now you're a moron. If you're somebody who loves DC and you are a DC fanboy and you define your DC fanism by the fact that you love what DC gives you in terms of entertainment, be that in the comic books or the movies or the animated stuff, whatever, if you are a fan and you define your definition of your DC fanboyism by the fact that you love DC, that is awesome. However, if your definition of being a DC fanboy becomes defined by what you hate, your definition of DC fanboyism includes in its definition the prerequisite to not only love what is DC, but to hate what is Marvel. Well, now you've gone from being a fanboy or a fangirl to being a moron. I mean, there's nothing that says you have to love DC, and there's nothing that says you have to love Marvel either. Not at all. But it just really gets me, and this has been around for a long time, and it always will be around, but it always has struck me as really odd that, oh, I love Marvel, but to just like, there's some people who are so weak, so unimaginably weak, that they have no idea how to be a fan of something without saying they also hate something else. Like, to me, that is just like complete, absolute weakness in its worst form. It's like, oh yeah, you like Marvel, but you are so insecure in your love of Marvel that you have to trash DC to make you somehow justify your love of Marvel. You don't need to do that. You love Marvel. You love DC, but you're so insecure about your love of Man of Steel or your love for the upcoming Batman vs. Superman. You're so insecure of your love of that to justify your love for that, you got to trash on something else. You got to trash on Marvel. To me, I've just never understood that mentality. So one of the things that's really stood out to me about the Batman vs. Superman, number one, is the completely predictable war of the opposite fanboy morons. And not true fanboys or fangirls, but these fake fanboys and fangirls who define their fanism by what they trash, which is just makes you a moron. But the second thing that's really stood out to me too is this goes more into the world of movie media, because what we have now, like with Batman versus Superman, people hear what they want to hear and then they run with it as fact. For example, the people who want to hear that Batman versus Superman is going to be negative, is going to be bad, right? So some quote unquote report comes out that somebody has heard from somebody else that Batman versus Superman isn't very good. Notice that chain. Somebody has heard from somebody else that Batman versus Superman isn't very good. Okay? Suddenly that becomes a story, and that's going around. And now what you hear in conversations is, hey man, I'm hearing that Batman versus Superman isn't very good. And then when you push them on, it's like, where did that come from? Oh, well, it came from this guy. Oh, did that guy see it? No, that guy heard it from another guy. So it's like, okay, do you see what's happening here? And then that starts getting passed around as information. Some guy heard from some guy that they heard that Batman vs. Superman wasn't very good. And that becomes the thing. Now, fast forward a little bit. Now go to the opposite side of stuff. Some guy hears from some guy who heard from somebody else that Batman vs. Superman is really good. And so now everybody starts talking about, hey, it's being said that Batman vs. Superman is really good. Oh, that's now the information. And it's so bad on both sides. Both extremes is so bad. Like I was talking to somebody the other day and heard, hey man, I heard that Gal Gadot, this has nothing to do with my issue about Gal Gadot. I hope Gal Gadot is awesome as Wonder Woman. But somebody says, I heard Gal Gadot is like one of the best things in Batman vs. Superman. And that starts going around Twitter. And suddenly I start seeing on Twitter, people talking about, hey, Gal Gadot is one of the best things in Batman vs. Superman. And then I start pushing some people on it. Hey man, you put on your Twitter the other day that Batman v Superman, that you heard Gal Gadot. Where did you hear that from? Oh, I heard it from another guy. Okay, did that guy see Batman vs. Superman? No, he heard it from somewhere else. And so now you see it's just the long broken telephone. And it's no more as valid than those weird, odd reports about how bad Batman vs. Superman going around is. About, oh, so you saw Batman vs. Superman, you know it's bad? No, I heard it from this guy. Okay, and that guy saw Batman vs. Superman. Well, no, he heard it from somewhere else. So you start to see this chain of unreliable information. I mean, and look, this isn't new to Batman versus Superman. All right. This isn't brand new to just Batman versus Superman. This happens with a lot of different films, but I don't ever think you've seen it cranked up to volume 11 like you have with Batman versus Superman. I mean, not even Star Wars: The Force Awakens had this much misinformation disguised as real information being thrown around. I mean, you had a lot of people speculating, but it felt like everybody knew what was going around about Star Wars: The Force Awakens was speculation. So it was never a problem. But now, like when you're talking about this Batman versus Superman situation, everything's being passed off as information as opposed to speculation. And we all know how often speculation is accurate, 5% of the time, maybe. So we're going to have to sit around and wait and see. I just thought it was really interesting seeing this whole thing about how this whole circus is starting to evolve around Batman versus Superman. Man, I just can't wait for the movie to get here. I just cannot wait for the movie to get here so I can go and watch the movie and hopefully be really excited and thrilled. So let's see how that goes. All right, I got a couple of things here I want to touch on today. First of all, you guys might have remembered that the other day on my podcast, I think it might have been on yesterday's podcast, somebody was asking me, hey, John, what do you think of the new Ghostbusters trailer? And I thought it was terrible. I thought that first Ghostbusters trailer was a bad trailer. It is not one of the worst trailers I've ever seen in my life by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought it was a very poor first trailer for something. Look, you're rebooting Ghostbusters. Your first trailer, that's your quote unquote coming out party. That is your first impression. And you know, the old saying is true. You can't redo a first impression. And the first impression is always the most important one. And I thought as a first trailer, it was pretty poor. Now, I still got a lot of hope for the movie. I do. I have a lot of hope for the movie. I'm still going to defend this movie. I've been defending this movie ever since it was first announced. I think you got 4 incredibly funny ladies. I think you got a great director attached and you got a great brand. I think there's a lot of reason to be very enthusiastic and excited about this Ghostbusters reboot. I do. But I'm going to call a spade a spade. The trailer was poor. So anyway, this morning, a whole bunch of people started tweeting me to let me know, John, did you see there's a new international trailer? And everybody else was telling me, and it's better than the first one that came out. So a little bit earlier today, I jump on YouTube and I look up the trailer, and I got to say, while I still do not think that this new version of this Ghostbusters trailer is very good, it's a big improvement over that first. I'll go so far as to say, I think this was a good trailer. I think this new Ghostbusters trailer, this international, I don't know if it's an international one or they're calling it version 1.2 or something like that, but this new version of the trailer that has a lot more Chris Hemsworth in it, by the way. Not that that's what makes it better, but this new version of the trailer, I got to say, I actually grinned a couple of times. And I didn't even grin in that first version of the trailer. To be honest with you, I didn't even crack a smile, not once. But this one made me grin. This one felt like it had a little bit of the nostalgic charm. Now, yeah, they show the same shot in this trailer as they did in the last one of Slimer, but that didn't do it for me. A lot of things, but for whatever reason, I felt a little bit more of a sense of nostalgia in this trailer. I felt a little bit more humor. It didn't feel desperate. I gotta say, I think this Ghostbusters trailer definitely much better than the original one that came out. And if you have not seen it, I would encourage you to jump on YouTube and see if you can find the second trailer for Ghostbusters, because it's pretty good. All right, let's move on to this next thing here. Now, a little while ago, a very odd announcement came out of the CW, because there have been talk about, hey, can, we already know that the Flash and Arrow cross over with each other because they live in the same universe. They live in the same cinematic universe. And they're on the same network, CW. And then CBS launched Supergirl. And people would ask me, hey, do you think they'll cross over Supergirl with Arrow and Flash? And I would say at the time, no, they can't do it. Number one, they're two totally separate networks. And number two, in Supergirl's world, they already established in the TV show Supergirl, in case you don't watch Supergirl, in the TV show Supergirl, they announce that Superman has been around for 20 years. That Superman is a part of that world and has been around a long time. So I would say, no, you can't cross over Arrow and Flash because, number one, they're on different networks. But number two, there is no mention before Arrow and Flash that this universe had metahumans. As far as the universe that the Flash inhabits, to the world, that accident that gave Barry his powers was really the origin, the genesis of metahumans to a lot of them there. And so the fact that there's been no mention of Superman or some superhuman being or anything like that, that would be a huge contradiction to suddenly say that they could cross over and be in the same universe. Well, then they came out and announced that they were going to have a crossover episode, that they were indeed going to have a crossover episode. And that's when I realized, somebody mentioned to me, John, you forgot that CW and CBS are owned by the same company. So that took care of the problem of the fact that they're on two different networks. I totally forgot that those two companies were owned by the same company. But I have still been scratching my head a little bit about how do you solve this problem of having the Flash in the same universe as Supergirl, because in that universe, Superman's been around for a long time, and you're going to have to retcon your entire history in Arrow and the Flash to allow for the existence of Superman, because that's never been a possibility there. Well, today, a story came out where first of all, a poster advertising the Supergirl Flash crossover came out. And it's actually really cool. It's very reminiscent of an old Superman versus Flash race comic book cover. You should look that up if you can. But also a description, a little synopsis of the episode came out, and it makes everything make a lot more sense. And here's what the description of the upcoming Flash and Supergirl episode is. Kara, for those of you who don't know, that's Supergirl. Kara gains a new ally when the lightning-fast superhero The Flash suddenly appears from an alternate universe and helps Kara battle Cyoban and Silver Banshee. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing Cyoban. Anyway, aka Silver Banshee and Livewire in exchange for her help in finding a way for him to return home. So there you go. We did speculate a little bit about, after they announced that there was going to be a Flash Supergirl crossover, that it's got to be an alternate universe because, right, there's no other way, right? Because I was scratching my head trying to figure out how on earth do you have Flash and Supergirl in a crossover episode together with the continuity problems that creates with the fact that Superman has been around for decades in Supergirl's universe. And with this little description, obviously Barry's just going to cross realities. And so that solves the problem. I mean, it's unfortunate. To me, it's a little lazy, but time travel, alternate dimension, that's always kind of the cop-out thing in the comic book universe, but whatever. I think it's still pretty cool that they're going to do a Flash and Supergirl crossover. I do think it's a bit of a cop-out and a little bit lazy that it's Barry just jumping dimensions, because that makes everything consequence-free, but whatever. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. I will personally look at this episode of The Flash and the Supergirl crossing over. I'm going to personally look at it as an Elseworlds episode. I'm going to just pretend it doesn't actually exist in the continuity, unless they come up with a reason that it exists in the continuity. Because if it does, I mean, that's pretty interesting. All right, let's go on to the next story here. This next one was kind of interesting. Now, we've known for a while that the Lego and 21 Jump Street directors, Lord and Miller, that they were brought on by Lucasfilm to direct an upcoming Star Wars anthology film that's going to be based on Han Solo. We've known that for a while. But now, Bob Iger, who's the CEO of Disney, of course, owns Star Wars, he came out at an event and said that this new movie is actually going to be an origin story of Han and Chewbacca. It's not just a young Han Solo movie. This is going to be the origins of Han and Chewbacca. So I think, look, as a Star Wars nerd, I think this is absolutely freaking fascinating. I think this is great because there was a lot of speculation out there that with Lord Miller doing a young Han Solo movie, that we didn't know how young they were going to go. And there was some speculation that this would be before he partnered up with Chewbacca. But according to the statement from Bob Iger, it sounds like this is going to be not just a young Han Solo movie, this is going to be Han and Chewie movie. So I'm wondering, as I know a lot of you out there are, is this movie going to be when Han and Chewie meet and how that life debt that Chewie has to Han gets formed, that Han is going to save Chewie's life at some point, all that kind of stuff, and they become, bonded for life as partners. I think that's cool. I think that's exciting. I cannot wait to see this brought to fruition on the big screen. I'm chomping at the bit because, first of all, though, you got to figure out a way to make Chewie look a little bit younger. Because one of the things that I was a little irked by in The Force Awakens was, look, I know that Wookiees have longer lifespans than humans. I know that. I get that. But Chewie actually almost looked younger in The Force Awakens than he did in Star Wars. And that doesn't make any sense. So I hope they address the aging of Chewbacca at least a little bit, at least in this origin movie you're doing. Make Chewbacca at least look a little bit younger than he did in The Force Awakens. Because I know Wookiees have a longer lifespan. I get that. But it would be cool now if he could look a little bit younger, since there's probably like 60 years difference between when this Han Solo movie is and when, maybe 50 years between when the Han Solo movie is and when The Force Awakens. So at least make him look a little bit younger than he did in The Force Awakens. That would be pretty cool. All right. So, hey guys, one of the things I like to do on this podcast every day is take your questions via Twitter. And I'm going to get to that in just a second here. And the way you get a question to me on Twitter is by jumping on Twitter and simply tweet out a question to hashtag TJCP. Once again, you hop on Twitter and send out a tweet using the hashtag TJCP or the John Campea Podcast. So hashtag TJCP, and that's how you get a question to me. And I'm going to jump on Twitter here and take some questions in just a second. I am going to let you in on something a little bit personal for a second. I have been a little bit scattered the last few days. I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm not recording the show in my regular studio. The reason I'm not is I'm at my family's place out in Corona. And this show's going up a little bit later today. I have not talked about this. My family hasn't talked about this for the last few days. But for the last 4 days, we have an immediate family member who is been unconscious for 4 days and is not breathing on their own in the hospital. And it's a scary time for me and my family, I'll be honest with you. And we have been traveling a lot between cities, trying to be here at the hospital as much as we can. So I'm actually not at home right now. I'm actually by the hospital, but I was committed to doing this podcast for you guys. So I wanted to get this done. I've got my little laptop here with a little microphone, and I'm trying to record this in a little room right now so I can still give you guys a podcast. But if you guys could extend out your best thoughts and prayers to my family right now. I'm not going to go into too many details right now, but if you could, that would be awesome. And I would really appreciate it. And if for whatever reason you see the posting of this podcast become a little bit sporadic over the next couple of days, please try to understand and be patient with me as I try to balance all this kind of stuff together. That would be awesome. So I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much. And I will try to make this show as regular as I can for you guys. Just know that there might be some quote unquote disruption in service now and again. All right. With that out of the way, let me get now to the Twitter questions. Then we got the depressing stuff out of the way. Let me just get back to some of the fun stuff. The first Twitter question I've got here comes from Aaron Wempy, at Dub Wempy, who writes, which superhero film takes first place in the movie sales this year of 2016? So basically the question is, and we get this question a lot, what superhero movie is going to be the box office champion this year? We just saw Deadpool come out of the gate, do huge business, 300 million, over 300 million domestic, over 600 million worldwide. I'm going to tell you right now, Deadpool is not going to be the box office champion. Doctor Strange is coming out. Doctor Strange is not going to be the box office champion. Obviously, it comes down to Batman versus Superman or Captain America Civil War. Now look, this is all going to be dependent on how good the movies are. So let's say, for an argument's sake, that Batman versus Superman and Captain America Civil War are both 9s. They're both 9s out of 10. They're both equally as good. Okay. So for argument's sake, let's say all things are equal and Batman versus Superman and Captain America Civil War both come out to be 9 out of 10, or they both come out to be 7 out of 10, or they both come out to be 8 out of 10, whatever. They're equal. If that's the case, I believe the box office champion for superhero movies in 2016 is going to be Batman versus Superman. This is just it. Look, the two biggest superheroes in the world is Batman and Superman. All right. This is the first time in history the two have been on screen together. It's Batman versus Superman. This is nuts. So I got to believe, now I don't believe it's going to kill Captain America Civil War, but I do believe it will win the box office. Now, but that's assuming that the two are on equal ground. Let's go into let's speculate here for a minute. Let's say Batman versus Superman is an 8 out of 10. Captain America Civil War is a 7. All right. Then Batman v Superman wins handily. But if let's say Captain America Civil War is a 9 and Captain America Civil War is a 9 and Batman versus Superman is an 8. All right. So Civil War is a little bit better than Batman v Superman. I still think Batman v Superman wins the box office. But if like Captain America Civil War is a 9 and Batman v Superman is like a 6 and fans don't come out raving about it and it doesn't get great critical reaction, it's still going to make big money opening weekend. Opening weekend won't be affected. That'll be fine on its own. But what the question is then, after that opening weekend hits and the word of mouth starts to get out from critics and fans, if Civil War is like a 9 and Batman v Superman is a 6, then I think you're going to see Batman versus Superman will still have a bigger opening weekend than Captain America Civil War, but Captain America Civil War long-term will ultimately make more money at the box office. So if it's a 9-6 situation, then Captain America Civil War wins the box office scenario. And my phone's ringing, but I'm going to ignore it for now. Sorry about that. All right. Now, this next one comes to us from, where did it go? Okay, from Rob Johnson Music, at Rob Johnson Music. He writes in, I get the budgetary reasons, but has product placement and tie-ins for Batman vs. Superman gone too far? Bruce Wayne driving a Jeep, etc. I don't think so. Look, it's just a commercial. It's just marketing. Like, it depends. If you get into Batman versus Superman, and every 5 seconds, Bruce Wayne, aka Ben Affleck, is saying, Alfred, I've got to go into Gotham. I'm going to take my new Jeep Grand Cherokee in. And following it, when I'm riding in its luxurious leather seats and great sound system, I'll try to stop at the store and pick up some milk. You know, if every conversation that Batman has in the movie is about his Jeep Grand Cherokee, then maybe it becomes a problem. But for commercials outside of the movie, commercials outside of the actual film, I gotta tell you, I personally don't think it's a problem. I don't see it as an issue. I mean, I don't care if we see Bruce Wayne zipping around Metropolis as it's falling apart with the battle from Superman in his Jeep Grand Cherokee or whatever model of Jeep he was riding around. I think it's perfectly fine. But like I said, if he gets into the movie and he's using his new Dell laptop, Alfred, get me that high performance quad i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 500 gig solid state drive, beautiful performance Dell laptop of mine so I can look up the location of the Joker. Like if they start getting into that, then that'll be a little bit much. But otherwise, we'll just have to see. Well, listen, guys, I actually have to run. So I'm going to have to cut this podcast just a little bit shorter than normal. But thank you so much for joining me, guys. And again, big thank you to you guys for making this podcast number one in TV and film on iTunes. If you can do me a big favor, what really helps is if subscribe to this podcast using any platform you want on Android or on your Windows phone or whatever. You should be able to get this podcast wherever you get podcasts from. But if you've got iTunes on your computer, can you make sure you subscribe to this podcast with your iTunes as well? And make sure in iTunes, go in, rate this podcast, and leave a comment on this podcast. It would really help. So thank you so much for that. I will be... I'm not sure if I'm going to have a podcast tomorrow. I will let you know, but I will be on Jedi Council tomorrow afternoon, barring some kind of disaster going on. I will be on Jedi Council tomorrow, so make sure you check that out on Collider Video. And thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, send in tweets to me. Follow me on Twitter and on Facebook, just at John Campea. And if you want a question for my podcast, just send out a tweet with the hashtag TJCP, and that's how I will make sure I find your question. So that'll do it for me, guys, for this installment of the John Campea Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, bye-bye.